social media, whatever you post kind of becomes a narrative. So people who can be easily influenced by you, they can look at this, they can see this and say, oh, yeah, they're trying to hold us down. We can't get a mortgage. We are live on social media. So welcome to another edition of Wealthy and Wise Wednesdays, my weekly podcast, where I share a few words of financial wisdom to help put you back in the driver's seat of your financial future. Today is Wednesday, September 29th. Thanks for joining me today. Man, I can't believe that we're already at the end of September. And if you are in business or if you are in any kind of endeavor where you're goal setting, this means that we're at the end of the third quarter. And if you've ever heard me talk about business before, as far as planning and as far as setting goals, I really recommend that you go out and get a book called The 12-Week Year. The book is called The 12-Week Year, and there's an entire coaching program that centers around the 12-week year. And with the 12-week year, I highly recommend you get it. It just gives a better insight into planning your yearly goals by showing you how to break those goals down into quarterly goals. Now that kind of seems like common sense, quarterly goals, but it's not. What he's really talking about is he's talking about running full steam ahead and getting the work done that you need to do in just 12 weeks. So it's really an amazing book. It's an amazing program. You're looking at getting more done in 12 weeks than some people do in an entire year. So great book, highly recommended. So with that said, I hope that you guys are crushing all of your goals and that you're ready to enter the fourth quarter, because with the fourth quarter, that is the sprint to the finish line. You know, the year 2021 is almost over. And for a lot of businesses and for a lot of salespeople, the fourth quarter is the biggest time of the year. It's time to refocus on those goals and set those goals and really go after them hard. And there's just so much excitement in the fourth quarter because not only are there the holidays and, you know, the seasons, but you're really pushing toward the end of the year. So exciting stuff. I highly recommend the 12-week year. So anyway, with that all said, what I want to discuss today for Wealthy and Wise Wednesdays is a decision whether we want to rent a home or whether we want to own a home. Because the American people have kind of been sold on the idea that home ownership is the American dream and that everybody should try to own a home. And that if you rent a home, it's somehow not a good financial decision, or like you are somehow less of a person because you only rent instead of own. And the reason I'm talking about this, the reason that it all came about was the other day on some of my social media platforms, I shared a meme that I found. I'm in this Facebook group for real estate investing, and somebody shared a meme that looks like it's a screenshot of somebody's Twitter account, like what they posted on Twitter. And it says, America, ... where your credit score says you can't afford to pay a $700 mortgage, so you pay $1,200 in rent. And I kind of get that. It could probably be frustrating. I can't imagine where that is true unless you're in a big city. But you know, my response to that is it's pretty ridiculous to even make that comparison. Because when you rent, there isn't a mortgage company who's on the hook for several $100,000. And quite frankly, if you have a bad credit score, that probably means that you have a lifetime history of making really bad financial decisions. And that's why when you apply for a mortgage, there's an application, because there's risk there to the mortgage company. That's why if you have a bad credit score, typically you're not going to be able to borrow money on as favorable of terms. Maybe you're required a higher down payment. Maybe you have to pay a higher interest rate. Conversely, if you have a good credit score, you can borrow money at much more favorable terms. But the bottom line is that it's not like this is any kind of conspiracy to keep the poor and the middle class down. There's plenty of middle-class people who have great credit scores and can get a mortgage no problem and could own a home. I just don't necessarily, I'm not a fan of, or I don't like when people post this stuff out on social media where it's only telling half the story. Because quite frankly, it goes to show how ignorant people are about money. And I'm not trying to say that to beat anybody up, but on social media, whatever you post kind of becomes a narrative. So people who can be easily influenced by you, they can look at this, they can see this and say, oh yeah, they're trying to hold us down. We can't get a mortgage. Bottom line is that when you rent, the company who's renting to you or the landlord, they're not on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars necessarily like a mortgage company would be. If they lend you this money, then you default on the loan. Bottom line is that I know people don't like it, especially nowadays, but you have to be held accountable for your actions. There needs to be personal responsibility. And if you have a history of making poor financial decisions, unfortunately, that's going to come back to haunt you. So as we kind of get into this discussion of whether you should rent or whether you should own, I just want to reiterate that what I do on this podcast is I do not give financial advice. I provide financial education. And then you need to kind of take the educational principles and apply them to your general scenario, or your specific scenario. The general principles apply to your specific scenario. But the reason that I'm talking about it specifically is not just I saw the meme, but I received a message on LinkedIn, which is one of the areas that I posted the meme. And the young lady asked me, what are your thoughts on renting? She said, obviously, this is an outrageous example that you shared, but she says in her situation, she only pays $700 to rent a house. And she doesn't want to buy a home because she's not married yet. Plus, she said she just started making good money in her career, and she doesn't really know where she wants to live. And so, when you buy a home, you're pretty much putting roots down in that area, at least for a few years, right? She said that she does know that the place that she wants to ultimately live is not where she's at right now. So she wants to be able to be agile and mobile and maybe be able to move quickly to somewhere else. And I get that. And then she also mentioned, the reason that she was messaging me about this is because she knows I'm a big fan of Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I post his content often, or I share quotes. And she says that she had just read the book. And in that book, he says that owning your home is a liability and it's not an asset. And when that book came out in the late 1990s, he got a lot of flack from it. But the bottom line is your home is not an asset unless you're renting it to somebody or unless you're somehow making money off it. Your home is a liability. It's an expense. If you have a balance sheet, you have a mortgage payment, that is money going out. You have property taxes, that's money going out. You have casualty insurance, that is money going out. That home is not bringing in any cash flow. It is a liability. And, right now we have a skyrocketing real estate market. So maybe you have a great equity position in your home. That's really, really good. Again, but unless you tap that equity or unless you sell your house, it's not truly an asset. That equity is just dead money sitting there, right? So it is not truly an asset until you sell the house. And if you're not planning on selling the house for, another 5 years, again, it's not really an asset. And there is no guarantee that in 5 years that the real estate market, that it's not going to turn around and lose value. I mean, we've seen that happen here in the last 15 years. A lot of people think the real estate market's in a bubble right now. 5 years from now, could very well be that our homes are worth less than they are right now. Because remember, the value of a home or the worth, the value that you see on Zillow is just an estimate of what people are willing to pay, like fair market value, what they're willing to pay right now in our current economic climate and our current conditions. Doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. And then also home ownership, the one thing I hate about owning my home. All the repairs. I mean, houses are money pits, all of the repairs and fix-ups that you have to do on it. Now, a lot of people, they like doing that stuff, and I don't fault them for that. That's awesome. You buy a home, you fix it up, you paint it, you decorate it, you make it your own. This is a place that you're going to live and raise your family. So when making a decision whether you should own a home or not. There's a lot more that goes into that decision than simply from a financial standpoint. So, but this young lady who wrote to me, she was looking at it from a financial standpoint because she's not married and she doesn't have a house yet. So she said she believes that renting can totally be an asset, as you can leave whenever you want. And I said, my response to her was, I agree 100%. Again, Americans have been sold on the idea that owning a home is the American dream. And it can be, because there is a time and a season to own. But there is also a time and a season to rent. And there are many situations where renting can make much more sense. Again, because when you rent, you're agile, you're mobile. Like, if something came up, maybe you could break a lease. You could do that fairly quickly with a lot less cost than having to sell your home quickly and move. When you're renting, you're more able to respond to any situation, to any opportunity. And again, when you rent, you don't have to come out of pocket to pay for costs to fix up the house or to make it nicer. I mean, maybe some very slight things that you're responsible for, but no major projects for sure. And the other thing that was brought up, this young lady said, in addition, with the current market, the cost of houses are so high. So it's definitely a seller's market. And I'll say this, and again, this is not financial advice. I know some very, very savvy people who have sold their homes and are renting right now because, and these are people who work in the real estate industry, who work in the mortgage industry, who the lure of selling that home and kind of ringing the cash register, like locking in their profits, it was too great for them to pass up. So they sold their house. They're currently renting and they're waiting for the market to come back down because they're convinced that the market will come back down at some point here in the near future. So that is not supposed to be financial advice. That may or may not apply in the market that you currently live in. But that is, again, something else to take into consideration. And, as somebody who used to work in the mortgage industry, I talk with people and I see lending being relaxed again. I see a lot of similar processes that helped lead us into the 2008 market crash. People getting loans with very little documentation on their job or their income, debt to income ratios being relaxed. Again, I'm not predicting some kind of major crash or anything like that, but I'm just telling you what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. And it's always fun when you're live on social media, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook, and you invite a guest into the mix. So this is my 2-year-old daughter, Ava, who is home from school sick. She's also got a wonderful bruise where she ran into the table full speed the other day, so that's always good too. And she likes to have fun. So all right. So we're going to put her down, and actually that's just kind of where I do want to wrap up with today for this podcast, is that there is no cut and dry rule that you have to own a home to be financially successful. Renting can be a really good option for people, again, depending on your specific scenario. What's your financial positioning? What are your goals? And if you don't have long-term goals, if you don't know where you're going to be living or where your job is going to be, don't feel bad if you're in a position where you're renting. Renting can be a really good idea. And I'll just wrap up, though, by saying, of course, on the flip side of that, for people who follow me, I'm a huge fan of being able to use real estate as an investment. I've owned 2 homes now. Our first home, when we moved a couple of years ago, we held on to that as a rental, and we have a really wonderful family there. We love them to death. They're awesome. So I think, again, that real estate can be a great asset. It could be a wonderful place, even like with your primary home. Again, we kind of talked about how it's not an asset, just numbers on a piece of paper. But in our primary home, over the last 2 years, we've only lived here 2 years, the price, again, the estimated price is appreciated by almost $100,000 just because this market is crazy. Now, I'm not really looking at that as an asset because I'm not tapping into that money. I can't tap into that money. It's just numbers on a piece of paper. So I don't get excited about that. So we really got to kind of keep everything in perspective. So again, I'm just doing this podcast to provide financial education, not advice, financial education. So maybe you can just learn about this from a different angle than what you have been hearing it, and just be able to realize there's two sides to each coin, and you've got to be able to take that knowledge or take those principles and apply them directly to your situation. And now she's got the paper shredder going, so that's what you hear in the background. So I think with that, I'll wrap up. So that is today's rant. And follow my YouTube channel at Sneller Financial, and also on Facebook, LinkedIn, or TikTok. All right, thanks, guys.